you're visiting with us this morning, have young children, do have classes for all ages. Younger classes are in the back. High school and college class are behind here. Before we dismiss the class, 406. No soul. More about Jesus would I know, more of his grace to others show, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me, more about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus, let me learn. More of his holy will discern. Spirit of God, my teacher be, showing the things of Christ to me. More about Jesus. More about Jesus. More of his saving fullness see. More of his love who died for me. More about Jesus on his throne, riches and glory all his own. More of his kingdom sure increase. More of his coming Prince of Peace. More about Jesus. More about Jesus. More of his saving fullness see. More of his love who died for me. Now we dismiss the class. All right, so this morning, thought about continuing on with James, but I changed my mind. So we're going to look at something else this morning. Persuasion. And we have a song in the book, Almost Persuaded, that we sing. What does, let's start out with definition. What does persuade mean? I'm sorry. Okay, motivate. Means to cause someone to do or believe something through reasoning or argument. So, I mean, that's something that we do this pretty frequently, don't we? I mean, we do this about on a daily basis, one form or another. As parents, we try to persuade our kids to do things, whether it's eat what we made them, or clean the room, or anything that they don't think they need to do. We try to persuade before we just flat out say, no, this is what you have to do. Of course, there's lawyers. They try to persuade jurors to believe their side of the story rather than what the other lawyer says. And at every church service here, we try to persuade people, don't we? We try to persuade people to obey the gospel. After every sermon, on Wednesday nights after invitations, we try to persuade those that may be lost and undone or that have fallen away from the Lord. We try to persuade them to come back. So, and we see this throughout the Bible, trying to persuade people to follow Jesus, to believe in Jesus, to, like I said, to turn from their ways. But let's start out in Numbers. I'm going to turn to Numbers chapter 14. Numbers chapter 14. Let's start off by reading the first 10 verses. We'll read the first 5. Richard, and then 6 through 10. Austin Perry, will you read 6 through 10? Okay. Richard.
Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel.
Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, whom had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. But all the congregation said to stone them with stones, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel.
Okay, so in these first 10 verses, I mean, what's going on? What's been happening up to this point?
Back, and the spies, of course, 10 of them gave a negative opinion.
Of what? Where had the spies?
They had been spying out the promised land.
The promised land.
And they gave the report that it's full of giants, we cannot take it.
Yeah.
And Joshua and Caleb gave the good report.
They're the only ones that said, no, this isn't. I mean, did they deny that there were giants, that there were, I mean, no. I mean, they didn't come back and say, there's nothing. I mean, they're a bunch of little folks, we can handle it. I mean, they didn't deny that.
It was huge.
Was big, yes.
So, kind of went along with that.
Yeah. So, these 10 come back and say, we're doomed. We can't do this. Why have we been wandering around? We just brought us out here to die in the wilderness. We'd have been better off, staying in Egypt. I mean, think about that statement. How were they treated in Egypt? Horribly. I mean, what were they? They were slaves. I mean, they were not treated well at all. So, what are the children of Israel? What are they doing? What are they trying to do? They were trying to persuade who?
The children of Israel were trying to persuade their fellow man.
Exactly. There were. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't. I mean, every single person that was voicing the opinion, but they were trying to convince everybody to, hey, we need to elect new leaders. We need to get out of here. We need to head back to Egypt. At least, as bad as things were, we had a place to. If we died, we weren't out here in the middle of nowhere. But what does Caleb and Joshua say?
Let's go do.
Yeah. Why? What was it? Was it just because we think we're better than them?
They had God on their side.
Okay. And why didn't the rest of the children of Israel understand that? I mean, just thinking out loud here.
They had lost their confidence.
They lost their confidence. They lost their faith. I mean, Toby.
That's what I'm saying. It shows a lack of faith on their part, especially after coming out the horrible conditions they had in Egypt. And then God sent Moses and all the plagues and everything they saw there. They finally get to leave Egypt, and then they're followed all the way up to the Red Sea. God parts the Red Sea, allows them to cross, and he kills all the Egyptians. They seen all that, and then yet they still had a lack of faith that God could help them take the land.
Right. I mean, the other thing, that God had taken care of them throughout this whole journey. I mean, even though, yes, they were in the wilderness, I mean, they were still taken care of. I mean, did he not provide food for them? I mean, Do what?
He did, and they questioned that too.
Yeah.
Bring us out here to
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they were, what we would say, they were a bunch of ungrateful people. I mean, they didn't appreciate what God had done. They didn't appreciate the fact that Moses and Aaron, for that matter, when he was there trying to persuade Pharaoh, let God's people go. Let us go home. The dangers that they were in. So there was two persuasions trying to go on there. There was the persuasion of all the children of Israel to buck the system, so to speak. And do you think they would have killed Moses and Aaron? I mean, yeah. Well, we say that, but God was with Moses and Aaron. I mean, not that God would not have allowed that to happen, but it's pure speculation on my part. So Joshua and Caleb are the only ones that are standing up for God and saying He's able to do this. He's able to take us into this promised land that we've been traveling for. This was our goal. Yes, sir.
Also proves that sometimes the majority is not right.
That's correct. Yeah. The majority, just because the majority of people say or do or believe something does not mean that that's the right way. For us, we need to think about that in our daily lives. Just because everybody is going in this direction does not mean we shouldn't be going in the opposite direction. It's hard to go against the grain, but sometimes that's the right way to go. Okay. So let's read on verses 11 through 19. Who will take 11 through 15? Bo, will you read that? Numbers 14, 11 through 15. And then Kelton, can you do 16 through 19?
How long will these people reject me, and how long will they not believe me, with all the signs which I have performed among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them. I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear it, for by your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, Lord, are among these people, that you, Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands above them. And you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now if you kill these people as one man, then the nations which have heard of your fame will speak, saying,
Because the Lord could not bring this people into the land which he promised them by oath, therefore he slaughtered them in the wilderness. But now I pray, let the power of the Lord be great, just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilt, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generations. Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you also have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now.
Okay, so in the first 10 verses, we see that they're wanting to go back to Egypt. They have pretty well convinced everybody they need to. Joshua and Caleb try, but the children of Israel say, we just need to stone them and go back. So in verse 11, what happens? What's the Lord do? He's unhappy. He's mad. And what's he want to do? He wants to annihilate them. Just get rid of them. Can you blame him? Not trying to make ourselves God or anything, but if the people that you've been taking care of, you just want to get rid of them. Like, I'm done. You don't care about me. You don't love me. You don't trust me. You don't believe in me, really. So I just want to be done with it. I'm going to start over. But what does Noah do? Noah. What does Noah do? What does Moses do? I had the flood on my mind while I was thinking about that. What does Moses do?
He reasons with God.
He reasons with God. He persuades him. He convinces, which it's hard to think about sometimes, that God is able to be reasoned with or persuaded. Daryl?
It's not been that long since the Lord came to Moses and asked him to go to Pharaoh. And Moses said, I'm slow of speech and tongue. Pick somebody else. And you read through this argument that Moses gave the Lord, it couldn't be any better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, Moses, when God approached Moses about going to Pharaoh to free his people, Moses was very upfront. Like, you're gonna have to pick somebody else. I'm not good at talking. I get tongue tied. I can't think of the right words. And then here, he's very eloquent in his speech with God, with his talk with God about why you don't need to do this, God. What was the reasoning behind that? I mean, was it he was worried about that he would be part of those that would be destroyed? What was his big point in reasoning with God and persuading him to not destroy?
It's what are people going to say about you?
Reputation.
God, if you do this, I mean, this word's going to get out. Word's going to get out that you've brought your children, your chosen people out into the wilderness and just couldn't accomplish what you wanted to. You know, again, this is speculation, but you wonder what God thought when he hears this from Moses. You know, what would we think if somebody came to us and says, you know, this ain't going to be right if you do this. I mean, we would get upset.
As well, too, because God is wanting to see what Moses would do.
Possibility. See how Moses would react to what was going on, how he would.
He already knows the future. He was just wanting to see how Moses would react to his comment.
Right. May very well be. But he tells him, says, look, God, if you kill these people, verse 15, as one man, then the nations that have heard of your fame will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people to the land which he swore to give them, therefore he killed them in the wilderness. So he says, now I pray, let the power of my Lord be great, just as you have spoken, saying, the Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgressions, but he by no means clears the guilty. What do you mean by he by no means clears the guilty? What's that mean?
He's just.
He's just. I mean, does that mean that we are always guilty? I'm kind of off subject a little bit here, but no. I mean, there is going to be a punishment, basically. It's not going to be the punishment that he initially was going to do, but there will be a punishment, won't there? So because of what Moses had done, what he had spoken, the reasoning with God, verse 20 says, the Lord says, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. Verse 24, though, he says, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and followed me fully, I will bring him to the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. So Moses, he reasons with God. He persuades him to change his mind of instant annihilation. God wanted to kill him right then, bring up a mightier people. So he convinced him not to do it then, but God still has his judgment on him, doesn't he? So, I mean, when we think about that for us, what does that tell us about God for us? Are we able to reason with God? Roger?
I think we can to some extent. Now, Paul tried reasoning about getting rid of thorn in the flesh, and God said, no, I've got a purpose for you.
Right.
But we also have to look at what was happening with Israel here. And the Lord said during his time on the earth that, people that don't hear, it'll be better for the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and other ones than these people because they've rejected.
Right.
This is what's going to happen to Israel. They won't go, all these men and women are going to perish in that land and not go over into the promised land.
Right.
And so you see a thing that's how the Lord works.
Right.
He'll let you talk, and you can get something, from that. But like
Right.
you said, he knows what's going to happen anyhow. He has that knowledge.
Exactly.
He can use it to his benefit, not mine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can request. We can when we pray and when we talk to God. I mean, we can ask Him, "Hey, please, remove this thorn." But in the end, what should our attitude be? Again, kind of a little off topic, but it still applies to us. What should our attitude be about when we ask this? Not my will, but yours. I mean, if it's your will that whatever we're going through or whatever we're dealing with, if that's what we've got to do, then so be it. And we have to realize that we have to accept that and work work with what we got. So, any comments or questions about this before we move on? All right, let's go over to Genesis. Genesis chapter 18. Karen. Oh, Karen. Through the translator? Through this translator? Oh, this is your, okay.
I appreciate this study. A couple of thoughts. One, when Joshua and Caleb hear the report, they do this interesting thing. There's a choice moment. They don't just say, oh, look at all these people, we better put our heads down, be quiet, not say anything. This isn't the time to ruffle that kind of feeling that we might have. But they not only in word, but they had a deed, which is a challenge to me, to display. I don't agree with what you're doing. So it makes me think about when we hear things that are wrong, one, do we speak up? And is there an accompanying deed that could help persuade people to see it another way?
Right.
That's one thought. The other thing is, I appreciate Moses in his reasoning, as you said, with God. And I think maybe he draws on his time in Pharaoh's palace and understanding the workings of the politics with other nations, the responses of other nations dealing with Egypt, how all those workings go on. I think that's reflected perhaps in his understanding of that is reflected in his comments.
Right. Now, nations, you're right about that, about all of it. But as a nation, your reaction to something that's gone on speaks volumes to other nations. How you deal with things, and if God would have dealt, I won't say incorrectly, but if God would have destroyed the children of Israel, that would have spoke wonders to those that were questioning him to begin with and his powers. So you're right. With Moses being a part of the palace at one point, he understood that better than anybody. Anything else? Yes, sir. So that was her comment. This is mine. Persuasion is influence. We do it instinctively. No one has to teach a baby to scream and cry in order to get food or a clean diaper. Toddlers influence by screaming and crying. We have to be taught a better way to influence and persuade. As adults, hopefully we have learned to influence in a way that invites, which by invitation. Consider the behavior skills that are referenced in Galatians 6:1. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. That's correct. So that's right. We have to learn how to persuade in a different manner. If we try to persuade people the way that infants do to come to Jesus, I don't know that we would persuade very many people that way. Sometimes that's how people want to. I know years ago, I would get so aggravated at somebody that I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to win them over by how I was. I was upset. I mean, they'd heard the same thing that I had, and still didn't believe, and it would aggravate me to no end, and my frustration came out with, I'd end up screaming and yelling, and that's not going to persuade anybody. Not in the right way, is it? That persuasion is going to send them away from God. All right, Genesis chapter 18, beginning in verse 20, verses 20 through 32. It says, "And the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sins is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know." Then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, "Would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" So the Lord said, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes." Then Abraham answered and said, "Indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous, would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So he said, "If I find there 45, I will not destroy it." And he spoke to him yet again and said, "Suppose there should be 40 found there." So he said, "I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, "Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there." So he said, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." And he said, "Indeed now, I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 would be found there." So he said, "I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, "Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there." And he said, "I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. We want to talk about pleading a case. So here Abraham is pleading with God, is reasoning with God, trying to persuade God not to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. What do we know about Sodom and Gomorrah? Not a place you want to be. I don't think I wrote this down. When Abraham and Lot separated, chapter 13, what had happened? What got Lot and his family to the land of Sodom and Gomorrah? It was a better area for their animals. At least what he thought was a better area. So back in chapter 13 of Genesis is where we read that. Let's look at verse 6. The land that they were in, Abraham and Lot and all of their people, says the land was not able to support them, that they may dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So Abraham said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll take the right. If you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. So Lot goes to this land that they're exceedingly wicked. I mean, that was known then. But Lot saw this as a greener pastures. There's a better place to go. That's where he wanted to go. So now God is what? God's fed up with the sin that is going on there in Sodom. And he wants to destroy it, just like what we read there with Moses. He's wanting to destroy these people because they've turned from God. So what does Abraham do? He bleeds. He starts his conversation with God. Why was that? Was it for the wicked?
Abraham, I believe, felt in his heart that there were good people in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was pleading for the good people he thought were in it.
You may be right. Do you think that because at this time when God says, I'm going to destroy them, was he thinking that Lot and his family, my brother, is going to be destroyed also? I mean, that could be part of it, is that when God says, I'm going to destroy these people, Lot is Lot not now part of these people? Would be considered one of these people? So in Moses' mind, maybe there's more there that are righteous than what I realize. I mean, God knew, didn't he? God knew who was there and who was righteous and who was not. So, do we think Lot was righteous?
Lot's wife that turned to, are you talking about she turned to
She turned a pillar of salt when they left, just right, Don.
And I listened to you real well. You thought Moses was saying if you can find 40 people, I'll save it. He got down to 5, he still couldn't find 5 people.
Yeah, Abraham was saying that if we can find them, started out with 50 and went down from there. So you're right, Don. Yep.
Yeah, and what got me was, though, he told her not, but she turned back.
That's
and
right.
when she looked back, he turned her into snow.
And salt, and a pillar of salt. That's right. Yep. So Moses begins in verse 24. Starts out with 50. Can I find 50? Then will you not destroy everything? He starts. It almost reminds me of when your kids, when you're going back and forth with, okay, you need to eat 10 more bites of this, and then you can be done. Well, it starts at 10, and they go back and forth and say, well, how about 8? Well, okay, 8. Well, now how about 6? Okay, 6. And then you finally get down to where you just give in and you say, eat 2 more bites and we'll be done. And then everybody's happy, and but Abraham starts with 50. I don't know how many people were. I didn't look to see if there was an estimate, and if anybody knows, you can please tell me. I don't know how many people there was estimated to be in Sodom. I don't know that it tells us. But think about the city of Conway. Mike, how many people are in Conway? Do you know? And 70,000 people. I would dare to say that Sodom and Gomorrah both had more than that. But think if we went to God and said, if you can find 50 righteous people in the city of Conway, will you not destroy it? I mean, that's a small percentage, ain't it? I would hope that the city of Conway would have 50 righteous, because we've got over almost 200 people that attend church here. And that goes back to something I've said and others have said. Walking through that door don't make us righteous. Our lives is what does. But think about it from that standpoint. If we were trying to start with 50, okay, we can't find 50. God, please. And again, it goes back to, in my mind, thinking that Abraham's thinking, well, if you destroy Sodom, my brother and his family are in Sodom, you're destroying them also. So I'm trying not only to save my family, but possibly turn people to God. You think there might be some of that in Abraham's reasoning? Yes, ma'am.
Abraham would be, I like your question, why Abraham would be so concerned. And to not belabor the genealogy, but Abraham and Noah existed. Their lives had 58 years together, which is an astounding thing for me to think about. Of course, the patriarchs told the faith of God. So it's very real that Abraham knew the results of the flood or the destruction, because he lived when Noah lived.
Right.
That destruction. So with that in his mind, maybe he really understood in a way maybe we don't. Of when God says, I'm going to destroy something, it gets his attention.
Yeah.
He's
He
got a
means
real
to get
reason.
rid of everything.
He's got a reason to believe.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. So I mean, there could be multiple reasons. Could part of the reason be the same as what Moses had? Is if you destroy these people, I mean, maybe a little different. And with Moses, it was, you brought him out to the wilderness. Now you're going to kill him. Could there be some part of that? It's like, well, you can't handle people. God, you can't deal with people being against you, so you're just going to annihilate them to get rid of them because you're selfish. All the things that we hear today about, God being, if he does this, he's an evil God because he's destroying people or he's sending people to hell because he's selfish. He wants everybody to love him. He has a major ego. Could that have been some of the reason that Abraham is trying to convince God not to, because of what the other nations might think or say? Again, that's my thoughts, Roger.
Brought up, it could be, but when it's all said and done, we know that there were not 10 righteous people.
No.
Or the Lord would have.
Yes.
But the Lord doesn't take into account whether there are righteous people there or not. Whenever destruction comes, it's going to come on all of them, not because of the wicked, not because of the righteous being wicked.
Right.
And it may not even be in all cases because the wicked are wicked. Some things do happen. This, of course, was from the Lord.
Yes.
So, whether there's righteous ones in there or not, it's not going to affect God's deal. Because if they're righteous, they're great.
Right.
They're safe. It's the destruction of the wicked. And it's a lesson to all of us that God's not going to put up. He may tolerate it for a while, but eventually it's going to come to an end.
Yes. No, you're right. God will tolerate the evil of the world, the unrighteousness, the hypocrisy. But at some point, he's going to get fed up with it, and he's going to bring judgment on all. Even Roger, to your point, if there would have been 10 righteous, he wouldn't have destroyed it. But had he went ahead and destroyed it, there's a chance that he would have given, just for instance, Noah, he would have given them the ability or the availability to get out, to avoid that destruction. if they were righteous. He let Lot and his family, yeah. So, I mean, if it had come down to that, even if Abraham wouldn't have been successful in saying, 50, 45, 40 on down, if he'd have said, I'm going to destroy this nation, but here's what they can do, those that are righteous, if they believe, they can be saved. Like I said, just like with Noah. I mean, Noah was told to build an ark, and he and his family, now he didn't have to, his family didn't have to follow suit, but any other questions or comments regarding this? Okay. So, Matthew chapter 2, just some quick stuff here before I end. At Christ's birth, he was visited by the wise men. And Herod, the king, had heard that there was one that was born, going to be king of the Jews. He gets worried, and what's he tell the wise men? What's he ask the wise men to do? I mean, he asks them, he tries to persuade them to come back and tell me where he is. I want to go worship him too. But as we know, there in verse 12, that these wise men were divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod. They departed and went to another country by another way. So, I mean, that was a small amount of persuasion. Just, hey, I'm going to persuade you to tell me because I'm going to say, I want to go there too. And sometimes that's what we do, let me rephrase this. Sometimes that's what people do in their persuasion is they make it seem like something good is going to come of it when not necessarily that's the case. I want you to do this because if you do, well, I'll be able to do this. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a selfish reasoning behind why we try to convince somebody to do whatever it is they want us to do. Rich young ruler, Matthew chapter 19. We know this story, but Christ was talking to this young man. And this young man was trying, I think, to persuade Christ that he was righteous, that he was a good person. But he wanted to make sure, we talk about this, a checkbox. Give me a checklist of things. Okay, I've done that. And Christ comes back to him there at the end and says, if you want to be complete, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven, and come and follow me. Christ tells him, reasons with him, persuades him, if you're wanting to do it all, here's what you need to do. Sell everything you have. Of course, as we know, him being a rich young man, he just couldn't get rid of his wealth. So he walked away sorrowful. I didn't get to the one, I'm going to say this real quick. Acts chapter 26. This is the one that kind of got me. It gets everybody with Paul's speech. Acts chapter 26, Paul's before Agrippa. Paul's basically preaching a sermon to him, isn't he? He's telling him about his life, about Paul's life, about how he got to the point where he was. We'll skip down. I'm going through this quick. Verse 27, Paul says, King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you do believe. And Agrippa's response to Paul was, you almost persuaded me to be a Christian. So sometimes even the best we can do is still not persuasive enough for those that just don't want it. So thank y'all.